to say recording before, as you know. So welcome everybody. My name is Louise van Rhyn. I am the founder of a program called Partners for Possibility, which we're going to be talking about this afternoon. Now, we're going to be talking about 70-20-10 leadership development programs, but specifically and we're going to specifically look at the lessons that we've learned from running the Partner for Possibility program for the last 11 years. So there are about 3,100 people who have been through this program. It's been running for the last 10, 11 years, and it has impacted about 1 million people. Well, actually, it's more than 1 million people now. And so we're going to be sharing that, but it wouldn't be a Symphonia event if we don't create an opportunity for people to go into a small group and get connected with one or two other fabulous citizens. Now, I just want to say to you that the people who are on this call are a very special breed. So you're going to love the opportunity to be in a small group with 2 or 3 other people for literally 7 minutes. So it's not going to be a long story. Tasneem, if you could make sure that we set the timer. And when you go to the room, we have one question for you, 2 questions. One is to introduce yourself briefly to the people that you're in the room with, and to tell them, why did you decide to join this call today? Why was it important for you to join this call and to make this time available this afternoon? So Taz, if you're ready to send people off into the breakout rooms, that would be fabulous.
The rooms are
okay, so the rooms have found out from anybody who wants to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mute everybody, and then that means that when you unmute yourself, then that's an indication for me that you want to share something. And so we want to just create a few minutes to hear some voices. What did you hear in the breakout rooms around why did people join? Either what did you share yourself, or what did you hear from other people? And you can put your electronic hand on. The easiest is just unmute yourself, and then I'll give you a chance to speak. And also, if you don't want to speak audibly, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat. So just what did you hear? Why did you decide to join the call? Just so that I can kind of connect with that interest. Judy, I see you unmuting.
Okay, thank you, Louise. I was in the same room with Robert van Tonde and Philip Lemekwani, and what I have understood from them is that you know, the 70-20-10 methodology is a very unique methodology, and they want to know more about it and how to apply it in their workspace. Philip is from UNISA, and now they are working offline, and you just want to understand exactly how to utilize it with the staff. The principal also indicated that how to utilize the methodology, you know, with his team. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. And so, Judy, just because I don't have Robert's name on the list, which organization is Robert with?
Robert is a school principal from North Riding.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, excellent, wonderful. Thank you. Cool. Let's hear Vanda. I see Vanda's unmuted. Vanda, do you want to share with us why did you join today? No, Vanda? Was that? I think that might have been an accidental join. So let's hear. Anybody else want to share with us why did you join today? Wait until we've got a few people.
Okay, maybe can I talk? Can I talk?
Okay. You can, yes. Okay. And then we'll go to Bongi after you.
Okay, good. I am in the facilitation business, engaging people in learning rather than teaching. And I was just curious about what is this 40-20-10 thing about. So yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cass. Bongi, why did you come?
I came to meet Charles, the thought leader behind 70-20-10. I've just been honored, and I'm going to embrace this concept like never before. I'm here as a learning process facilitator and a coach for the Secunda Circle, to sharpen my skills, because when my cycle is up and running, I will be facilitating 70-20-10. Thank you.
And it is important, Bongi, that you therefore feel very comfortable to talk about what this is about. Thank you, everybody who spoke. If anybody else wants to share, please feel free that they can put their notes in the chat. Mokateku says, I joined to learn more about 70-20-10 and how I can use this in my everyday. Sorry, that was Teresa. Sorry, let's just see. Mokatuka says, wish to learn more about 70-20-10. I'm a PhD student. I'll be working with the Moiribus Circle. Oh, wow. And then Teresa joined to learn more about 70-20-10 and how I can use this in my everyday task. And Mokatua is talking about her research. So, welcome to everybody. It is such a privilege. The reason I run these sessions every month is because we have a strong sense of responsibility. We have learned so much from running this program for 10 years. As far as we know, and maybe Charles could tell us whether we've got this right, this is, Partners for Possibility is the largest, longest running 70-20-10 capacity building program. And what I'm gonna share with you is some practical tips about how to make 70-20-10 capacity building programs work. I'm going to be using PFP, Partners for Possibility, but this session isn't so much about Partners for Possibility as it is about the lessons that we've learned from running this. But let's start by, and I feel a bit intimidated because Charles is here, but I'm gonna do my thing anyway. Let's talk about where 70-20-10 comes from. So in 1987, Morgan McCall and his colleagues at the Center for Creative Leadership came up with this model. They said, we are so focused on getting people into classrooms, but actually we need to pay attention to the fact that 70% of our learning comes from our on-the-job experience. 20% comes from social sources and 10% from formal education. And I'm actually, Charles, in my notes about my every month when I do this, I actually have your name in my notes here. Charles Jennings, and I refer to the fact that you've given us in the book, you've given us a note to talk about that what we're doing is really around taking 70-20-10 into reality. But what's been interesting for me is how people are applying this. So in the learning and development space, people talk about the OSF ratio. O for on the job, S for social sources, and 10% for the F for formal education. Now, Tom Whelan has done some research in 2018 that says that maybe it shouldn't be 70-20-10, maybe it's 55-25-20. And we had a conversation last year with Julian Birkinshaw from London Business School, and he says maybe it's 50-30-20. The point is that it's not about the exact ratio. The point is that there are some things we're going to learn from doing stuff. And that's the on-the-job part. There's some work that we're going to learn from interacting with others. That's the S. And some work that some things we will learn from formal training. Why does this matter? Because as I think it was Linda said earlier, there's a real push on organizations to reduce the time that people spend in formal training in classrooms. So we need to find more creative way to develop people. So we've traditionally been putting a lot of effort and emphasis on the formal training part, sending people to training courses, running training in our organizations, arranging workshops, etc. Now, I don't know about how many other people on the school are from the learning and development space, but my clients are telling me that what we've been doing to date does not seem to be working. And we're not getting return on investment, especially not from workshops and training courses around leadership development. Now, I don't know whether this is unique. Charles is kind of nodding his head, so I'm hearing that's also happening in other organizations. I keep hearing from people saying, we've invested this millions of rands sometimes on some big program, and yet we haven't seen any behavioral change. Leaders are unconscious, as uncaring as before. They say all the right things in the training courses, but their teams have not seen any change. and the learning doesn't seem to be sticky. So let me just hear whether this resonates for anybody. And again, as before, if you want to say something, you can just unmute yourself. I'll see that you're unmuted. Anybody else have you grappled with this idea that Cass? Let's hear from Cass. I see you.
Okay,
unmuted,
good.
Cass.
I'm talking about flipped teaching. Okay, so I am not doing in my classes any teaching at all. I enable my learners with thinking scaffolds to teach me what I want them to teach, and I know where I'm going, so I'm leading them through my curriculum while following them. Full stop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Cass, so Cass has seen the light, but I want to hear from whether there's any other business people from businesses who would say that they have seen that the sending people to classroom stuff as the only leadership development methodology is not having the kind of impact, and we're not getting the return on investment. Dion, I see you unmuted.
Sorry, I just joined. They have load shedding. Yeah.
Thank you, Dion. Well, we're delighted you're with us. I've also got load shedding, so I keep hoping I'm gonna keep up, but we're delighted that you're with us, Dion. So yeah, so we're hearing this all the time from people. Now, my personal experience, and I'm very, very aware of how privileged I've been, is that my personal experience is that I have learned most from doing stuff and then going one step further, reflecting on that doing, and the term that we use all the time in Partners for Possibility, and Bongi, this is a term that I'm hoping is now starting to feel familiar for you, is that we take our own experience seriously. Now, I've had, again, I've talked about my privilege. I've had many opportunities to do amazing things, but I did MBA in 1992, and I can promise you that I've never used more than about 10% of my MBA. That's a horrible return on investment, because I spent a lot of money and a lot of time, took a year off to do this. And so, and I have a whole library full of files and courses and things I've done. The reality is that many of those things have not led to any change of behavior in how I do things. And yet there are some, thank you, Charles is giving us some more, some more kind of juicy stuff here in the chat. There are some learning experiences that have been completely transformational to me on so many levels. One is I had the opportunity to do my doctorate, and we used a methodology where we inquired into our own experience. It was called autoethnography, and we were encouraged to take our own experience seriously. That's been a life-changing experience for me. I've also done courses like when I did the Time to Think foundational course with Nancy Klein in 2007, it was a shift in the trajectory of my life. I did the Common Purpose Meridian program that also had a massive impact on my life. And I think it's because of the on-the-job component. And being a Partner for Possibility has been life-changing, and being part of the team who delivers the PFP program has been life-changing. And what I've realized in taking that experience seriously is that my learning came from doing and then reflecting on my doing, came from interaction with other people, and it came from formal training. But what we've also realized is that it's not enough to just have those three kinds of learning experiences. It's all about the coherence of design. And again, I've got many stories, but I'm not going to bore you with any of those details. So what I'm going to do this afternoon is we're going to share with you the big learnings from 10 years of facilitating Partners for Possibility. So I said earlier, it's 11 years now, more than 3,000 delegates. We've impacted more than 1 million people. It's one of the largest programs of its kind. And what we know is that this program has had significant impact on the lives of the people who've been part of the program. So what I want to do is I want to show on the screen, I have some slides here that I want to show you, and I'm going to, oh, sorry, that's the wrong presentation. That's not a good plan to show the wrong presentation. I'm sorry about that. I was just opening another presentation because I wanted to make sure that I have my information right. So Elizabeth Moss-Kanter has just recently published her book called Think Outside of the Building. And I'm reading it at the moment, and it is mind-blowing. I'm loving the book. But what she is actually telling in that book, she tells the story about how we, very similar, she doesn't tell the Partners for Possibility story, but she tells stories of programs similar to Partners for Possibility. And she talks about the advanced leadership initiative that they've developed at Harvard, where people are encouraged to learn from doing, from tackling difficult issues and then addressing those difficult issues. So Partners for Possibility is an example of that. Last year, we had the opportunity to publish the book about the impact of the program on individual people and on organizations and on teams. And for anybody who's ever had the opportunity to read that book, it is full of stories that just inspire you about what is possible. But because there are many people on this call who don't really know what Partners for Possibility is, and because I'm going to be referring to it quite a lot, I thought I'll show you just a 5-minute video, and it is just 5 minutes, which will just give you an overview of what the program is all about. And then we're going to dive into the detail and into the lessons. So this is just 5 minutes of introduction to Partners for Possibility.
Extraordinary leaders not only have the ability to build a real sense of community among colleagues, teams, and departments, but the power to create hope and change throughout our country. They empower, inspire, and uplift individuals in their own organizations, as well as in under-resourced schools where leadership skills are so desperately needed. These are the leaders that can bring South Africans together to initiate a ripple effect of positive change. These are the kind of leaders our country needs.
Research shows that leaders learn more about leadership from being immersed in a challenging environment where there are no easy answers than from going to business school. Partners for Possibility is an award-winning field immersion experience for leadership development. Business leaders and school principals from under-resourced communities are partnered in a co-action and co-learning partnership to achieve maximum leadership for both parties. This multifaceted year-long program is carefully structured to incorporate 16 aspects of leadership development that build leadership capacity in different ways. The innovative 70-20-10 model, incorporating action learning, social learning, and formal training, is designed to enable long-term sustainable change through resilient, socially conscious leadership. The experience is structured to deliver future-proof leaders who know how to apply key leadership skills in the real world.
By being outside the office, you learn a lot more about your own self-leadership and general leadership than you'd ever learn from a business school.
Partners for Possibility has taught me to become a positive deviant and get rid of the negative norm.
I learned that the most creative and innovative solutions come when you really listen to people.
I've learned that people come up with their own solutions when you really listen to them with full attention.
Being outside of my own context and connecting with people that I wouldn't normally do gave me a deep sense of appreciation and understanding for the work that we still need to do in this country.
The Partners for Possibility program is strengthening the fabric of South African society by creating opportunities for people to work together across traditional boundaries. By spending time in communities outside their offices, business leaders develop a better understanding of the critical issues facing South Africa. The program is not only benefiting businesses. The development of socially conscious leaders has a significant impact within South African school communities too. Principals are empowered with skills, knowledge, and confidence to manage and lead their schools more efficiently, motivate their teachers, involve parents, and build networks of support to address the school's most pressing needs. Since the launch of the program, Partners for Possibility has strengthened leadership capacity in and around more than 1,000 schools across 9 provinces. This has enriched the lives of more than 23,000 teachers and more than 750,000 learners.
What also we learn from the Partners for Possibilities approach is that leadership is at the center of all developments in organizations and society. I note that the leadership approach targets the principal, but listening to the stories from the principals and the CEOs or the executives, it's very clear that the leadership approach is the leadership that plants seeds of leadership in everyone.
Leaders who see possibilities instead of problems, who radiate with transformative energy, creating ripples of hope and positive change in the office and beyond. To join the more than 340 organizations that are contributing to South Africa's well-being while developing the kind of leaders that our country dearly needs, email pfp@symphonia.net or visit pfp4sa.org.
I want to be a pilot. I want to be an engineer. A doctor. I want to be a robotic engineer.
Oh, let me stop there for a moment and hear whether anybody has a thought or a response in response to just that video, or anybody have a question or anything before we continue. And you can just unmute yourself and we'd love to hear from you if you've got anything that you want to share. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going. No? Everybody happy for me to keep going? Well, I will do that then. So I'm going to be talking about, firstly, the key enablers, what we have seen. Jacqueline, did you want to say something, or was that just a kind of thumbs up for the video? Thumbs up for the video. I want to talk briefly about the key enablers for these kind of programs. And then we're going to talk about the design elements. Specifically, I've got 10 design elements I'm going to talk about. But firstly, the key enablers. So, and this is now for people who are interested in saying, how do we make these 70-20-10 programs work in our organizations using what we've learned from Partners for Possibility? Well, firstly, we've discovered that these programs are successful when they are well designed, when the design brings coherence. So often, and I'm thinking of what you were saying earlier, Linda, that in large organizations, people kind of put lots of things together, but they're not they're not integrated. There's not sufficient coherence. So the first one is coherence. Secondly, I think what we have discovered, and this has been a big learning for me, is that we actually need to be clear about what is the change that we want to see and what is the impact that we want to observe as a result of people going through this program. And many times people in leadership development and are worried about doing that. They're worried about kind of articulating those up front, because then they're worried they're going to be evaluated before it. But the beautiful thing that we've seen about Partners for Possibility is the stickiness and the behavioral change that's happened as a result of people being part of this program. The third part of design, and as you see, I'm kind of going on about design a bit, and we will spend more time around design, is that we have to carefully weave all the aspects together. It's linked to that first point around coherence. It's not enough to just say to people, okay, now you're going on this workshop, now you're doing this, now you're doing. There has to be a careful weaving together, and the participants and the people who are part of the program need to be clear around how their participation in all these different aspects are actually going to work together to achieve an outcome. Nazneem, are you able to help us with just some background noise? The fourth key enabler is that you have to be clear about the theory of change that underpins the design. Now, this is important for the delegates, but it's also important for the local support team. So if you think of, we heard from Bongi earlier. Bongi is going to be facilitating this program in Secunda, and we're just in the process of kind of training her and making sure that she's ready to do that. If she isn't clear about the theory of change in Secunda, then chances are that the people on that program is not going to get the benefit, because it's all around, you know, there's a very carefully designed theory of change that underpins this program. And I'll talk a little bit about that. The fifth key enabler is about skillful facilitation, and lastly about choice. Now, what do I mean when I say choice and skillful facilitation? Well, let's talk about choice first. Now, the one thing we've realized through Partners for Possibility is that, and we draw on Santiago Rincon-Gallardo's work when he says that learning is a practice of freedom. We have seen time and time again that when people feel that they've been forced to do the program, they don't learn, they don't get as much value. But when they choose to do the program, when this is something that they want to do, and I saw Jacqueline earlier. Jacqueline has been part of Partners Possibility, so she can talk from her own experience, but she chose to be part of the program. She asked, she said, please, can I get the opportunity? And then her learning is so much, there's so much, we have the chances of her getting value from the program and learning from the program is so much better than when a manager decided on her behalf that she's going to be part of the program. So a core idea for us is Peter Block that says, if I cannot say no, my yes doesn't mean anything. I want to talk briefly about the two most important models that underpin our theory of change. One is around this idea that we are working at 3 levels of change simultaneously. There's impact on the individual level, there's impact on the relational level, and then there's impact on the work that people do together. And what we are doing with our tracking mechanisms is we're tracking the impact on all 3 of those levels of work. And then the last very important, or the second very important model is what we call seeing, being, and doing. So we have come to the realization that a lot of how we are in the world is impacted by the stories that we have about the world. And that impacts what we do. And so we as facilitators are constantly creating an opportunity for people to reflect on the stories that they tell, the way they see the world, how that's impacting how they're showing up, and ultimately what they are doing. So in addition to these 2 models, we also have a reasonably well-defined theory of large-scale complex social change. We draw on the work of Otto Scharmer and the Presencing Institute and the U process, which I'll introduce you to. And then for us, we've carefully selected whose work are we bringing into the world, and we've specifically looked at Nancy Klein's books and Ben and Rosander, Art of Possibility, Flawless Consulting by Peter Block, and Community, the Structure of Belonging. And what we've then done is we've pulled all these together into this beautiful kind of process that I'm going to share more about in a minute. Let's just stop there for a moment and hear whether anybody has a comment or a thought around just the idea that a key enabler of this work is great design. That it's every program, and this is important for our program, but you're gonna look at what is true for your program, is that we have to be clear around which levels of change are we trying to work, and then ultimately we need to make sure that people know that there's choice. So it feels to me as if this group is quite quiet. I'm wondering whether everybody is kind of working away, doing emails on the other side, and that's why we're not really getting feedback or response. But let's see whether anybody, Jacqueline, you've been part of the program. Are you willing to share just from your experience of being a participant? I'm putting you on the spot here. I'm sorry about that, but you know.
No, it's okay. And I can strongly emphasize the fact that I put up my hand to take part in the program, contributed to my willingness to take in the content. because I was hungry for that. And I wanted to work with the principal and make a difference. And the success will not be that if I was forced to do this. So I can really say it's a mindset you have to adapt, and it takes time. Partners for Possibilities, it all depends what you put in it. You can do it lightly, or you can do it with everything you have and really take hands with the principal and try to help and sort out, because it's not necessarily money they need. Money is always something you can raise funds or donations, but it's that moral support. It's that extra pair of ears, that delicious attention you give, the beautiful listening. I mean, that is words that I really associate with Partners for Possibility. And that's the thing that sparked in me, is to really listen to people without interruption, because when you interrupt, you judge. And that was something that I really took for heart. But I can only emphasize, yes, if you do it willingly, the reward and the investment is so much greater.
Fantastic. And Jacqueline, we might come back to you right at the end to ask whether you've got any other thoughts that you want to add to that. Charles, I see you've got your hand up, so we'd love to hear from you. So for those of you who don't know, I introduced Charles earlier. He's the one of the co-founders for the 70-20-10 Institute. He's joining us from London, and we'd love to hear from you, Charles.
Thanks very much, Louise. I just wanted to comment on your design principles, which I think are really absolutely excellent. They're really good grounding, and they absolutely concur with my experience and use of 70-20-10. And as you may know, my colleagues and I wrote a book, developed a methodology around 70-20-10. We published a book in 6 years ago, and we describe the designing for coherence. We describe as plan for the 100 and start with the 70. So you actually plan your design looking at every opportunity that you can take, and actually you then say, okay, how can we do this? And I put a comment in the chat box about Woodworth and Thorndike, who were two very eminent American psychologists who published a paper 120 years ago in 1901 called the theory of identical elements. And what they said was, the closer the environment is where you learn to do something to where you're going to apply it, the easier it is to apply. We sort of know this naturally. So the idea of transfer, if you're learning to do something in the environment where you're going to use it, transfer almost goes away, the challenge of transfer. So I think that just quickly going through this, I think that design for coherence, absolutely. Design for impact, absolutely. I think that, again, we always say start with organizational outputs, understand what the results are going to be, and understand that learning is a process, and what you're looking for is results, and you're looking for improved performance, which is the sum of behavior change and attainment. So you're looking at those things. Absolutely. I think the careful weaving is really important. I see a lot of and hear a lot of discussion I've had for the last 100 years, feels like 100 years, last 20 years, around, is it really 70, is it really 20? And the answer is, even the original research by Morgan McCall and his colleagues, actually the research identified 16 categories, which Bob Eichinger then reduced down to the 3: learning through experience, learning through socially exposure to others, and learning through formal. And when they did this research in a number of areas, they did a US-based one, they did a survey based in India, or they did a global survey. Not once did those figures come out nice and neatly 70-20-10, but every time they came out the fact that most learning occurred through experience and practice, and working with others, and conversations, networks, and so on. That was the major piece, so that's important. Just briefly also, I think it's the point about a clear theory and a clear model of change is really, really important, because learning, we all know learning is highly contextual, and your context will change from my context, which will change from Bongi's context, which will change from Cass's, from everyone's context will be different. So you really need to make that contextual piece. And the last point I'd make is that I'll leave the choice out, but I think the skillful facilitation, and that word facilitation is really important, because it's not about teaching. It's about how do we facilitate and create opportunities for learning. And I think that's the big step. I used to work with a man called Jay Cross, who was an American who died a few years ago now, but Jay wrote a wonderful book around informal learning. And he often used to say to me, Charles, the problem that we're dealing with, and this was in the business context, the problem we're dealing with is that many managers and most learning professionals don't understand the difference between schooling and learning. And schooling is one aspect of learning, but learning is a much, much bigger piece than schooling. And until you can sort of break out of that, have the facilitation to break out of that schooling model, it's really difficult. Sorry, I'll stop talking now. Okay.
Thank you, Charles. So I just want to say to everybody, you got 2 for 1 today. You got me, and then you got Charles Jennings, which is always an amazing experience. In the past, we used to, I had to go all the way to, I don't know, I can't remember where was that conference. It was somewhere in Europe where
it was Eindhoven in the Netherlands. I think, the Philips Center, Technology Center.
Yeah, it was beautiful. So I can't wait for us to be able to travel again. Thank you for those of you who are able to switch your videos on. It's so much nicer to talk to people when you can see the videos. So Marianne is also with us. Marianne is an experienced learning process facilitator. So Marianne, I am going to ask you at the end of this next part to share with us some of your own experience of being a learning process facilitator and what you've taken away from doing this. But let me just kind of now go into more of the detail of the design. And I'm going to be speaking to some of the things that Charles mentioned earlier. But so I'm going to talk about 10 design elements: purpose, open-mindedness, learning community, partnerships that matter, a clear journey map, process over time, skillful facilitation, clear contracting, walking our talk, and the timing of formal learning. Those are just 10 ideas that I think is specifically what we've learned from Partners Possibility that we can share with you. So the first one is around purpose. Now we know that purpose is one of the 4 conditions that drive intrinsic motivation. And we've discovered that we have to be really clear with our participants around why. Why are we doing this program and what are we trying to achieve? And specifically, what are we hoping to see with regard to changes for individual leaders, behavioral change, the way that they do things, the way that they show up in the world? What are our expectations with regard to teams or groups or organizational units? And what are our expectations with work that we need to do? And personally, I can say when I started the program, it was much less kind of clear about what we were trying to do, and we didn't see the impacts. Only when we became clear, when we could clearly articulate our expectations, that people were able to work with us and co-create those. And what we've learned to do is to be really clear around what will success look like. How will we measure impact on those 3 levels of I and we and work? And how will we know whether we've been successful? So for anybody who's involved in leadership development, capacity building programs, those kind of being clear, this is also the way in which we're going to show return on investment, is if we can clearly articulate what we're trying to do. That doesn't mean that we are putting people into a straitjacket. It just means that we are, at a high level, we have a clear picture. And then if each person and each, partnership or group will then work within those expectations to develop the outcomes that they are committed to. The second design element, and this has been a really powerful idea, is that we need learners, participants who are open-minded. So some of you may know the story about Harvard, the field immersion experience program at Harvard, where they really struggled with MBA students who arrived in Boston from all over the world and were quite close-minded. They were worried about how am I going to come across and what are people going to think, and that drove their behavior. So Harvard developed this thing called a field immersion experience for leadership development, which meant that they, instead of working directly with these leaders, they gave them an opportunity to go into a community and try and do a really difficult task And then they struggled. It wasn't easy to achieve success. And that made them open to learning. Now in Partners for Possibility, it's relatively easy for us because we're asking business leaders to go into schools. And as you all know, it's probably one of the most challenging, complex environment. And then we ask them to work with principals, and principals are challenged with the most difficult task in education. So that means that you almost can't not be open-minded, because you know that you don't know, but there are still some people who come on the program thinking, oh no, I'm going to give them some solutions. And we know from experience that those solutions are typically not well thought through. They don't take enough of the context into account. So we feel that we've hit the jackpot when we discovered this opportunity to take people into education. We're currently having a number of conversations with people around, can we take this program into places like local government, where we have massive issues around, delivery of service, etc. And it would be the same one, because there's no one who has easy answers. So it's about creating environments where there are no easy answers in this work, which I think today is probably the reality in all of our lives. The third design element is for Partners for Possibility, each business leader and principal partnership become part of a learning community. So when Bongi says she's going to have a circle in Secunda, she will be the person who will be working with that learning community, and she'll create the kind of conducive space for learning in that space. Marianne did that in Sasolburg, or in Vanderbilt Park, actually. So we know that connectedness is one of the 4 conditions that drive intrinsic motivation, and that we learn most and best in a safe community of peers. We also know that we learn best through immersion, when we can experience new ways of being and doing. So we see these learning communities, it's almost like a sandpit. It's a laboratory to experiment with new behaviors and practices. And then as people become confident about showing up with compassion and love, which is what we're asking them to do, and and become careful of their judgment, for example, which is one of the other things that I think we heard briefly about from Jacqueline. The confidence to go and practice that way spills out into other areas of their lives. And so we have found the learning process the learning community a really important part of our journey. And we increasingly talk to clients to say, if you want to implement a 70-20-10 program, make sure that you think carefully about that learning community and how you're going to make the most of that as a, that's the 20% as an enabler and a contributor for learning. In the learning community, the participants experience this beautiful balance between challenge and support, and they are confronted by their gifts by people who care about them. And the message that they get is, I matter and my voice is important, and I experience belonging, inclusion, and voice. And those are critical enablers for people to learn. So, and then the last part about the learning community is that in that learning community, all the participants become accountability partners to each other, and they hold each other accountable. I've seen that so many times, and I'm sure Marianne and Anita and other learning process facilitators on the call can tell their stories about how they have seen people kind of, make a promise or make a commitment early on in the journey, and then a few months later they forget that they made that promise. And then their colleagues in the learning community will no doubt remind them of that. So this beautiful ability for peer accountability is just wonderful. The fourth design element, I'm going to pause after design element 5, but I just want to kind of go on for a few more. Is that we have, again, we've kind of we didn't, this wasn't exactly designed up front, but we've discovered through the program how powerful it is for partners to be in a one-on-one partnership with someone else, and knowing that that partnership matters and it has significance. So what we've seen is that when people are in a one-on-one partnership that matter, they firstly show up. They don't use stupid excuses for not coming to the workshop because they know that their partner is going to be there without a colleague. We've seen them participate more actively, and they're often on their best behavior. And what we've seen is that people, when they're in these partnerships, they implement, they hold each other accountable, they practice their newfound skills, especially we heard Jacqueline talk earlier about the skills of listening. They practice those skills with each other. And we have also seen that if we can create boundary spanning partnerships, then they're even more powerful. So, so it's about partnerships that cut across industries, geography, race, religion, gender, culture, distance. There's all sorts of ways in which these partnerships, just the nature of the partnership, create the learning opportunity. So that's part of that 20%. And I'll talk a little bit more again about the 70-20-10. But let's just see whether anybody wants to specifically say anything about what we've talked about so far. Any comments around those first 4 points around the design? Just going to keep an eye open whether anybody put their hand up or unmute their microphone. No? Want me to continue? I just want to see, I saw earlier that Chris Klopper is also joined. No, he's not with us anymore. He was with us just now. That was always fun to have Chris with us. Anybody want to say something or comment on what I've said so far? Okay, so I'll continue and then I'll create another opportunity in a little while. Sorry, let me just quickly clean this out. So the fifth design element is, again, something that we're now applying in many other areas, is that when we are able to clearly articulate the journey map, and we're able to show people very clearly how this journey will unfold, even though there will be lots that will not be, specified up front. It creates that little bit of safety that people need in order, well, feeling psychologically safe. We know how important that is. So for us, the program, what you see on the screen here is the Partners for Possibility Journey Map. We, right at the top of the screen, you see those 3 courses. That's our 10%. And then you see the journey in that with the red line. That's our theory U. We show right up front that what we are asking people to do is to show up with open mind, open heart, open will, to spend phase 1 developing that, and then they come to the bottom of the U and they go into phase 3 and they start to do the work. But we're very clear that we don't want them to start the work until they're ready to do that. So we carefully support them through this journey to recognize that if we can hold back on solutions and really invest in relationships and understanding the context, the chances of actually coming up with good solutions is so much better. So that's the fifth design element, is a clear journey map. And again, as a designer, I know how hard it is sometimes to kind of put our necks out and put this out. And this picture took us a few years to develop, but now that we have it, and again, I'm sure that Marianne can talk from her own experience, it's just so useful as a facilitator to be able to guide people through this process. The sixth design element is that this process is that it's about development over time. It's not, we know learning is a process, it's not an event. And we are advocating a learning journey. And 6 months is the minimum, but I think learning journey should be 12 or 18 or 24 months. Because we know that psychological safety and trust takes time to develop specifically in the community of practice or in the leadership circle, the learning community. And we know that we go through phases of development and that it takes time to develop that mastery. And what we want to create through this program is the opportunity for people to develop mastery. We also know that if there's a bit of a time period that they have to go through, then they develop grit and tenacity. We've seen that so many times. And we have seen that over time, people become more comfortable to give feedback and encouragement to their peers after 12 months of working together. So, and then lastly, the fact that in this program, deep and meaningful friendships develop, but that takes time. And we have seen that that is key for engagement and creating communities of belonging at work. So we, you know, when people ask me, and say, no, we don't have time, we just need to go quickly. And I now walk away from that because I know that this needs time to kind of percolate and become part of who we are being, rather than being thrown into an event and thinking now we've learned something. Design element number 7, and this is what we talked about before and Charles commented on. And again, I look at my colleagues on the call and I see Marianne and I just think of her. She's such an example of what I mean when I say skillful facilitation. But we've developed, Charles, and this is for Charles because I don't think Charles knows this, we've developed this role. It's called the Learning Process Facilitator. That's what Bongi is doing. And this person has 3 sets of skills. They are typically accredited coaches. They're also facilitators and they're project managers. And they bring all these skill sets together in this role. One of the things that we've discovered that happens and is possible through PFB is that the coaching is in context, which means that when Marianne works with a business partner in a coaching session, that's the same business partner that she saw in the learning community, and she saw the behavior in the learning community and can bring that into their coaching session. We've also realized that the facilitation of the learning process is so powerful. So the preparation for the formal training, so creating the fertile ground for that training to really be sticky, facilitating reflections on doing and learning and being challenged, and especially the being challenged when people had a moment where they felt challenged. If the learning process facilitator can support the participants to take that seriously. The learning process facilitators provide support with regard to capturing insights and stories and different perspectives. They also spot learning moments, so they see when someone feels triggered or where there's something that's happened in a partnership that's kind of resulting in a particular opportunity to learn. And lastly, they have the job to look for opportunities to remind and amplify and connect and strengthen and encourage and challenge. And lastly, what our learning process facilitators do, and I am going to ask Marianne to talk briefly about your own experience. The learning process facilitators model what it means to be a lead learner. Santiago Rincon-Galerno helped us to see that when learners, whether this is school or adults, when they see other people teaching, they don't learn how to learn. But when they see their facilitators learning, then they take that becomes a model for them, and they respond to that by learning themselves. So Marianne, can I put you on the spot and ask you to share a little bit about, you have been a learning process facilitator, you've seen some of these ideas in your circles, maybe just your perspective on what I've said so far.
Thank you, Louise. I will definitely do that. I just want to ask you, just so that I'm sure that everyone on the call knows what it's about, can you just quickly tell them the 70, 20, 10? I know the percentages are not exact, but what is the 74, what is the 20, and what is the 10? And then I'll start.
So the 70, and I think I did it right at the beginning, but I'll do it again. The 70 is about the on the job learning. So that's the taking your own experience seriously. That's from doing things and then reflecting on doing. 20 is the social learning, so that's what happens in the circle and with the learning process facilitator, specifically the role of the learning process facilitator and that circle, and also what they learn from each other. So that's the social learning, and 10% is the formal learning. So for us, it's those 3 workshops that people attend.
Okay, thanks. Now I'm sure that all the latecomers are also up to date because some people check too late. So what I just want to say, what I reflected on is part of my own journey. I think I was not the same LPF in the last round than I was in the previous rounds. And the reason for that is I did not take my own learning seriously in the first round. And I did felt like at that stage, I think there was a moment for me where I was really honest with you. I was on a call and you happened to be on that call. It was with LPFs and other people in the community. And then you asked us to give our opinions and just share where we are. And then I remember I asked the question, Louise, do you want the right answer or do you want the honest answer? And I kind of realized it was for me at that stage, it was a scary question to ask. And I felt like, although it wasn't the truth, but I felt like because we are so trained in our minds how it usually works in corporates, that if you challenge a leader or if you confront them directly, there's a big chance that you may not be there tomorrow. So my experience with you was obviously different because you're practicing as the lead learner what you are learning. But then I asked the question, you said you want the honest answer. And when I gave my honest answer, I got the feeling that, okay, it wasn't just a mistake that I have made. This is more, it's wider, it's bigger. We can all learn from that. And then you mentioned the words that we want to take this as a learning opportunity and how we can learn from that. And that kind of made me calm to realize that I'm not alone on this journey. And that whatever I'm learning, I can share. I don't have to hide it because that's what we tend to do. We want to hide our mistakes on the job. We don't have that feeling of feeling psychologically safe, to share that. But that is also an idea that we bring from that doing circle that you have shown. We obviously have been influenced with that over a period of time from your childhood, from where you worked, how you grew up, the schools that you went, all of that. So there is still this seeing in the world that we are not allowed to share what we have done wrong. But actually, if you think about it, it's so abnormal because how do we all learn to walk? It's by falling down and getting up again. Or how do you learn to ride a bicycle? It's not from the getting up and go the first time. That was just luck. It was from falling down and trying again. And a very good example for me, because it happens a lot to me, is how do you learn a route? By getting lost. So then you know exactly where you should not go and how to find your way. And I see some people smiling, so they relate to that. So my main learning was I have to take my own learning seriously, but I couldn't do that when I didn't feel safe. But when I knew that I had your backing as the lead learner and you said to me that you want the honest answer, that is when I realized, okay, this is where I can add value and share how not to do things. And I think that's also how I started. I said, okay, so how not to start or how not to do, this is what you shouldn't do. Because at that stage, my circle was not very successful. And then Dina, which is also our coach, lead me further to say, well, maybe we started wrong, but we don't have to end. It's not about how we end. It's how we start is how we end. Are you going to end strong? And what can you do to change that? And when I really start applying my own mind and what's working for my circle, I also learned, because I'm in other capacities doing other things, I learned a lot about relationships. Like when the last circle that I had, one of the principals in the business leader said to me, I know that what we are supposed to do, we've read the contract, but you want us to tick the boxes and we're telling you this is not working for us. This is how our relationship is working. I'm like, okay, then I'll back off as long as it's working. So I had to let them go, and I didn't like what they were doing, but that was working for them. And so, it is mainly sharing about reflecting, but being able to share what it is that you are not getting right. What is it that you're grappling with? Because it's very easy to watch any YouTube video and, for instance, a good cook, how they make whatever, and it looks so easy until you start trying. It's like, this is not so easy. It feels like they're lying to me. But if they have showed you the mistakes first, then it's like, okay, I can do that. It looks like I can relate. So that element of humanness that we bring, that it's okay. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to learn. It's okay to make a mistake. And if you can do that and you can show that, and being vulnerable in that space, knowing that you are vulnerable, but you are safe enough to be carried, that is when most people learn. People learn from mistakes. That's how we are wired like that. That's how we learn. Otherwise, we would walk, a baby would, you know, get up and go. And that's not how we are.
So, Marianne, thank you, because what you are modeling for us is this idea that in programs like these, it's not just the participants who learn and develop, it's also the learning process facilitators, it's the people who lead the program, we are all learning. And that's what I'm so excited about, is that we have a army of people who are developing capacity because they're out there doing stuff. They're not just sitting in classrooms talking about stuff, they're actually trying and they're making mistakes and they're finding it difficult and they're grappling with it, because you're right, that's how we're going to learn. So what I want to do now is I want to invite anybody else, if you want to share something. I'm going to just talk about those last three aspects of the design, and then I'm going to just again invite anybody else who wants to say something, because I'm conscious of time, and hope that you're still finding this useful. The eighth design element is, I think we talked briefly about this before, is that we have to contract clearly with regard to our expectations. And it's basic things like, if there's going to be formal training, when is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? What's the reading that we need to do in preparation for training? Why are we asking you to read this reading? Because these aspects all contribute ultimately to the impact. And we as designers and facilitators have to really be able to account for why are we asking people to do what. Also, what are our expectations with regard to the social learning component, the learning community meetings, the coaching? What expectations do we have with regard to asking people to do cross-boundary work, because we know that that's where the value is going to come. We see that my own experience as a leader, as a facilitator, as a participant in this program is the site of learning. That's the work that we're going to be doing. And we are expecting people to take their own experience seriously. But again, we've realized that we have to contract that up front, because otherwise people think it's just, you know, a normal training course where you just show up and you do your bit and you go home, and there's nothing in between. So this clear contracting has been really important for us. And what we have, because we're in Partners Possibility is facilitated by a not-for-profit, we've had to be very clear around the monitoring and evaluation processes, and therefore what the deliverables were going to be, which again is kind of different from how these things processes normally work. Design element number 9 is around walking our own talk. So the experience and the design has to be an expression of our theory. That's been a major idea for us, and it's really changed how we've done this program. For example, Daniel Kim's core theory of success is a very core idea for us, that the quality of everything we do depends on the quality of our actions, which depends on the quality of our thinking, and that depends on the quality of our relationships. So this is an idea that we introduced to our delegates early on in the process, but we have made sure that every part of our design speaks to this. For example, we have created these cross-sector co-learning and co-action partnerships as a place for people to experience, develop the relationship. We've selected our formal training modules to speak to that core theory of success. The whole idea around our learning communities is that we set them up as thinking environments. We've used Otto Scharmer's theory U and put a lot of effort on developing, investing in the relationship before we do anything else. So that's design element 9, is that we have to walk our talk both in how we are being with each other while we are doing this work, but also ensuring that the program is an expression of that the design is an expression of the theory. And then lastly, we've learned that we have to carefully look at the timing of the formal learning. So in our program, it's on a just-in-time basis. So people do the formal learning, time to think before they go into phase 1. And then they do flawless consulting before they embark on phase 2. And then they do community building in the middle of phase 3. Because every time they do that training, it's to set them up for the next piece of their development journey. And that's been a really powerful part of the process. So let me stop there. Now I've talked about 10 elements of design. Mukateko, I see you, and you've got your video on, and I'm hoping that that means you want to say something, because I'm tired of listening to my own voice. And I just want to acknowledge that Anita has given us a long story here in the chat. And maybe Anita, if you're willing to unmute yourself and say briefly something, maybe just tell us what you've written there, that would be amazing. So Anita or Mokachuka or anybody else, if you could unmute yourself, we'd love to hear some voices.
Hi Louise, I'm just going to leave my video off because I've got a terrible signal, and that's why I wrote the long story in the chat. But it's just you know, what you've mentioned about the 70-20 and theory it actually goes so well hand in hand together, and the way the program was designed is so good that if one follows the way that the program has been designed, you can only have success in it. And it's mean work, it's life-changing work, and it's probably the most fulfilling work I've ever done. So yeah, and the rest of the story is in the chat. For the
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, and sorry about the signal. So Charles, we have massive issues with signal and load shedding and electricity and all sorts of things in South Africa. You really are experiencing our, you know, the third world part of our country, which we like to not tell people about, but it's a very real reality. Thank you. I see someone else had a thumbs up. So anybody else want to make a comment or ask a question or say something about what I've said so far? These 10 design elements. Hey, so Charles, we'll come back to you in a minute. We'll give you the last little piece, and then we're gonna hear whether you want to share any thoughts from your perspective. But one of the things that you know, people often ask me around is about impact and measurement, and how do we make sure that we you know, that what we're doing has value. Now, because we've run this program for a long period of time, we've had the joy of lots of research being done on partners with possibilities. So UNISA did an impact on the impact of PFP on the business leaders. We've had numerous case studies. We've written these 2 books. The latest book is full of stories of impact. And as a designer and facilitator, what's been so powerful for me is continuously hearing, you know, exactly what Anita said now, is that when people look back on their PFP experience, it's one of the most transformational experiences of their lives. And they talk about how they've, you know, it's changed the trajectory of their lives. I've got so many people who actually, as a result of PFP, has changed their jobs because they realized that they were called to do something different with their lives. I want to say just, this is going to be my last part, and then I'm going to open it up for any further conversation. So, you know, if you look at those 70-20-10, the 10%, the formal learning, we talked earlier about the fact that it has to be delivered just in time. The modules have to be delivered for adult learning. Ideally should be, I think, in the world that we live in today, delivered modularly. And so for us, we deliver it virtually or face-to-face. For PFP, that means that we've got 4 modules of time to think, 4 modules of flawless consulting, and 4 modules of leaders, convener, or community building. So we are continuously being surprised and in awe of the stickiness and the impact of this work. So we've realized that that the learning that happens through the 10%, in addition to all of the learning that comes from the 70% and the 20%, is so much more powerful as part of PFP because of what happens before the formal training and what happens after. So we often do these modules in places not part of PFP, and I've never seen this kind of stickiness of learning anywhere else. The second part in terms of the learning from doing, which is, as you know, the part that we all really put a lot of attention to is that doing is the main site of learning. So I'm personally a bit, I'm careful of the term action learning, because I've seen too many times that people call it action learning because they're doing some kind of program that's been specifically developed, or project that's been developed for the leadership development program, but they're not taking their own day job seriously as a site for learning. So so that's just one of the things I've discovered. If we can help every leader realize that their day job is in itself an opportunity to learn, which is what Charles mentioned earlier, is that you know, that we don't need to then take them out of this situation and into that situation, because they're learning where they are. We know we don't learn much from only doing. We learn a lot from doing and then reflecting on the doing by taking our own experience seriously. And we encourage people, a big part of our program is autoethnography, reflective writing. We also have discovery writing processes. We're creating opportunities for people to be in thinking partnerships and be coached. And then we use thinking councils quite extensively as part of our program for really taking their own experience seriously. And then the last part is the social learning. This is the glue, and we think it's the most important aspect. It's also the most challenging to get right. That's why we're so, careful and committed to the idea of a learning process facilitator, who can then provide in-context coaching as well as group facilitation. And then the fact that we've got this learning community as a secondary site of learning. And so that's the kind of essence of what I wanted to share today. And now I want to create an opportunity for a little bit of a conversation. And I know that some people have had to leave. I'm sure there's been some load shedding challenges around the country. But let's see, anybody who wants to just share some thoughts or responses to what I've said so far, or, have a question or a comment about what you've heard. And you can just unmute yourself, and we would love to hear your voice. No?
Louise, can I just make a couple of comments? I think it's fabulous. I think listening to you talk through what PFP is doing and the models, the approach it's taking is really, really impressive. I think there'll be no doubt in my mind that it would be successful. And I think it's fabulous, to be honest, to be true. And I think there's just a couple of things that have come up, which I'm really, for me, are really critical. One is, I think, Marianne, you were talking about the importance of psychological safety. And I think that it's clear that that's very much part of the whole PFP process. And yet I think in lots of learning contexts, and actually I've seen it even with the big consultancies working with big international companies, they ignore the importance of psychological safety, because psychological safety is the bedrock of any learning culture. You cannot have a learning culture unless you have psychological safety. So, if I don't feel able and free to admit my mistakes, if I don't feel free to challenge the status quo, if I don't feel free to question, dig deeper into what I'm doing and what I'm being asked to do, learning culture doesn't exist. So I think that's, first of all, that's really interesting for me, and I think that gets left to one side. And of course, that culture of psychological safety comes from the top. And we've all worked with organizations or worked in organizations where the people at the top don't do as they say, and they may say that they're very open to criticism, they're open to people challenging, they're open to people admitting mistakes, but actually, when the rubber hits the road, often they're not, and that creates a corrosive environment. And I think that's, so for me, what Marianne was talking about, that's really, really important, I think, in terms of and also in that design element 6 about process over time. And I also think, Louise, what you've said at the end there on your element 10, and about the fact that we have to think about learning intentionally in a way that just learning by mistakes, just learning by doing, of course, that's where most learning happens. But if we don't take time to reflect, if we don't have take time to reflect individually or reflect with someone else or reflect as a group, and in fact, I referred to Jay Cross earlier on, and Jay, one of the other things Jay always said was, you know, conversation is the stem cell of learning. You know, people like to talk, and of course we all benefit from that. And so reflecting, whether we're reflecting together or individually or as a group, as a team, and I've seen it happen. I've seen simply using reflection be really, really effective in terms of improving performance. I worked with a government department in New Zealand some years ago, and all their heads of their various sectors, departments of their overall child welfare department, simply by opening up psychological safety and getting them, the 12 or 15 senior leaders who met once a quarter, around a table to talk about what they'd set out to do, what was happening, the mistakes, the errors they'd made, the successes they'd have, and then just talking about that. Just that process opened up huge amounts of learning and actually overall improved the performance of the entire government department simply by that simple process. So I think that having that intention to learning, and I've said, and Louise, I'm sure you've seen or heard me say many times, you know, when we boil it down, we learn essentially in 4 ways. We learn through rich and challenging experiences. We learn through opportunities to practice. We learn through having good conversations and building diverse networks. And we learn through reflective practice. They're the sort of 4. So experience, practice, conversations and networks, and reflection are really the way that we learn. And that's, I always come back to that as my sort of base ground of my grounding. And when I work with organizations applying 70-20-10, I often hold that up to them and say, okay, you're designing some solutions based around 70-20-10. How are you addressing providing people with rich and challenging experiences? And again, I work with Ørsted, the big Norwegian, it's the largest offshore wind manufacturer, offshore windmill manufacturer in the world. I work with them, and they replicated the Centre for Creative Leadership, the work that Morgan McCall and Anne Morrison and so on did, and with their leaders, and they came out with very similar results. But they found that the best learning came from new challenges, came from working with others who are more experienced and others who are less experienced. So we have to take on a coaching role. So all those sorts of things are really, really critical. So if your program isn't providing rich and challenging experiences, opportunities for people to practice, that becomes, and again, many of us, you know, if we talk to sports people, I've been watching the cricket. I've been watching South Africa play in the 2020 earlier on today. But I've done sessions on 70-20-10 with elite sports coaches. I did one last year with coaches from a number of the Premiership, the Premiership football teams here in the UK, and the Australian cricket assistant coach, and the Irish rugby coach, and various coaches. And of course, when you talk about developing elite sports people, it's all about experience, practice, you know, interacting with others, and reflection. I mean, that's what, you know, if they're not playing, they're thinking about those things. And so if you're going to become elite in any field, my experience over 40 plus years now working in this area, those are really critical. And it's great to hear Louise, you talk, and other people involved in the P4P program. I think that you're really utilizing these extraordinarily well. And it's great to hear it, actually. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And I think what's been powerful for us is this realization that we are changing individual lives, definitely. And we've got lots of examples of that. And, you know, people like Anita and Jacqueline. And we're having a massive impact on our schools. And we are strengthening the fabric of our society because we're bringing people together across boundaries. And because the design is so, you know, so kind of well researched, and it's not just kind of put together, it's actually really well developed. The impact is predictable. I mean, we get great impact in at least 95% of the partnerships. There are 5% of the partnerships where you don't get the impact that we would like, but you know, we always know now that if we're going to launch a circle, at least 9 out of 10 partnerships are going to have a really powerful experience. And I think we need more of that. We need more programs that we know will have a very good chance of having impact on the lives of their individuals, on their organizations, on the kind of society at large, etc., etc. Thank you, Charles. I really do feel privileged to have had Charles with us today. I just wondered whether anybody else wanted to make a comment or a final response as we come to the end of this call. And Marianne, we'd love to hear from you. And then Robert van Tonder has unmuted himself. Let's go to Marianne and then we'll go to Robert.
So I was just thinking while we were talking about the lead learner, and I know that a lot of schools have got an issue with reading. So I was wondering what it would look like and how would it feel like in a school. I don't have a circle at the moment, so I'll suggest to my ex-circle. What will happen if the principal start being the main lead learner about reading and their own skill around reading, and you know, in the staff room with some of the teachers, because it's important that the kids read. But if you don't display that skill or your shortage of that skill, if you have the shortage, it's okay to admit and to say, let's all learn together. What would be the impact in schools about reading if you just take that one skill and you apply it in that sense of the lead learner? I'm curious. I don't know the answer. I'm curious.
There is an answer, Marianne, because we've seen it. You know, when Ridwan started on this program, he wasn't a lead learner. He wasn't a lead. He wasn't modeling being a lead reader, and he has taken that on in a big way. And he has really challenged himself. And as a result of that, the whole school has become much more focused on reading. I mean, it's now acknowledged as one of the beacon schools in the Western Cape because there's such a focus on reading. It wasn't like that 10 years ago. It was because he decided he was going to take that on.
Wow.
So thanks for that challenge. Let's go to Robert van Tonder, who's got himself unmuted. Robert?
Hi, this was a very interesting course for me. I never knew about the 70-20-10 at all. If I reflect on something, I used to work in Botswana and doing lodge management, and we had assistant managers. And at one stage, the company we were under a bit of pressure because the assistant managers were never developing. And we also got to a point where we said, listen, you need to actually give these people the opportunity to manage. They are going to mess up, and I think that's the problem that we've got is as a manager or as a deputy principal or things like that, often we don't want to give those responsibilities over to others because you know that there is going to be a mess up, and then you're the one that it comes down on. And they said that the other part of it is also that when they do mess up, allow them to fix their mess up, because that's exactly the things that we do. I memean, they shouldn't mess up if they've been with you, they've got a certain amount of knowledge, they've seen what you are doing and things like that. They shouldn't go and turn everything upside down. It's exactly the same as us. We continuously make an error in judgment, or we make mistakes, but then we know that we have to take that accountability and fix it up. And I think it's speaking a lot in the same type of terms as what you're busy talking over here. And it was a massive experience what we saw in the development of those managers. And the one guy that was actually an assistant manager to me is now the general manager of the company.
And so, Robert, that's why we feel in this country specifically, our development programs have to build capacity both ways. And that's what I love about this program, is that I've seen, 1,500 business leaders who have personally become much more humble, much more conscious, much more willing to kind of, eat humble pie. They've become much more compassionate. And we have seen people who previously had a story about themselves as not being a, real contribution, just step up into those leadership roles in the most beautiful ways. So yes, exactly. You're exactly making the point that, if you just send people off to training courses and you don't give them the opportunity, as Charles said earlier, rich and challenging experiences. If we don't give those experiences for people and give them the opportunity to have them, the training will have minimal impact. And we've seen that so many times. Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you very much for everybody joining us today. I am conscious of the fact that this was very much me talking and lots of people listening. I hope that it was valuable for you. So we do have a few minutes for you to just share any final thoughts. If you have any appreciation, this is the time to do that. Tasnim will post in the chat a link to a feedback form if anybody's willing to give us just a few bits of feedback. Yeah, then I just want to give an opportunity for final thoughts to anybody who want to share, either in the chat or in the, just unmute yourself. Marianne.
Yes, so I just want to give an appreciation to you and Charles for joining us, and Louise for taking the lead in presenting this. It is such important learning stuff for all leaders in all different industries, and it's really very useful. So I just want to appreciate both the two of you and everyone that joined. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Thanks for always being such an active member of our community. It's just a joy to see your face on the screen. Jacqueline.
Yeah, Marianne actually stole my words, but I wanted to say exactly the same thing, that I'm privileged to be part of Partners for Possibility and to be associated with the brand, and I can really encourage other people to join the whole program and make a difference, because you don't know in the beginning what impact and what difference you will make, but at the end of the day, you'll see and you feel proud of the partnership you formed and the bond you've created and the change that you have you've established through your partnership. So even if it's small, if it's big, there's no monetary value on it. It's self-learning, and it's adding to the community. So thanks, Louise, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope that this is not going to be the last time we're going to be in a conversation. Charles, do you want to have the final word? I just have to tell Charles, the other day I was a guest for Tuli Marunzela. She's one of our, you saw her on the screen. She used to be our public protector. She's one of our heroes in the country. And we got to the end and she said to me, she turned to me, she said, Louise, you can't let people go without giving them some patkos. Now, patkos is like, what would be the English word for patkos? It's the food that you pack when you go on a trip. So what would your patkos be for us this week? What is it? Road food.
Road food.
Okay. Thank you. As we are getting back into our kind of other parts of our lives, what would your last and final thoughts be to us, our road food?
Dear Louise, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone again for just allowing me to get an insight, just to spend these couple of hours, because I've spoken to Louise previously. I've read a book, I've read about Partners for Possibility, but it's really wonderful just to hear people talking about their experiences and so on. So thank you for that, first of all. Regarding road food, I think that's really interesting. I think that, I can't think of anything specifically that hasn't been said, except that, we tend to think about learning, particularly from, when we're working with school heads and so on, we tend to get locked into our curriculum, into our sort of structured process of formal learning. And yet when we think about how we all learn, and how we all learned as children, through through experience and practice and talking to others and reflection. And I often use the example of, I've never spoken to any parent or any adult who, when they were a child and started to learn to ride a bicycle, that a parent or whoever it was, an adult, sat them down to teach them Newton's first law of motion. In other words, the law of inertia before they got on a bicycle. They were usually put on a bicycle, or all of us were put on a bicycle, and we were given a push, and we pedaled and we fell off, and we got up and dusted ourselves on, and on we went. And that may not be the most efficient and effective way to learn, but it's a really great learning experience. So, you know, we learn experientially, and that becomes deep learning. So I think that, you know, if we think of ourselves as human, we are learning, you know, we are learning machines. We learn from, in fact, before we're born. There's some very interesting research carried out in Scandinavia to show that babies in the womb can differentiate their mother's speech from other women speaking in different languages. So all of us have that capability. So we were learning before we were born, right through until we die, of course. So I think that I like to think of 70-20-10. I describe it very simply. I always say it's a way to extend our thinking about learning from schooling, from formal learning, into everything we do, every interaction. And we're social animals. Jerome Brunner, my great hero, Brunner once said, our world is others. You know, we only exist because of others, really. So I think that if we think about how we learn and how we apply that learning, it's happening to us all the time. And if we can create constructs and structures such as the ones that Louise has described, that will really give us, you know, a lot of power to our elbows, really. So I suppose my road food would simply be, you know, we are learning animals, and we just take every opportunity to learn. I'll give you one last little bit of data. We work quite closely with the European Centre for Education and the education and the employment market, and they're a group of economists, and they've determined that in work, if you're doing work with your head, in other words, if you're sort of like a white-collar worker, and if you're a teacher or whatever, around about 25%, and again, I've learned over the years not to stick to numbers, but around about a quarter of the time, we're provided with opportunities for learning. About a quarter of the time of what we do is an opportunity to reflect and learn. If we're manual workers, it's still about 20% of the time, the researchers there found. So that when someone mentioned earlier on about not having time for learning, we all have time for learning. In fact, we're learning all the time. And we just need to think about, okay, how do we take those opportunities and reflect on them and go forward? So it's really been great to meet you all. Okay.
Thank you very much, Charles. And that's why our learning process facilitators are so powerful, because they create those moments of reflection, they support people, and then over time it becomes second nature. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for everybody being with us this afternoon, and enjoy the rest of your day. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye-bye.